let's continue to unpack the trip that was taken to both Ukraine and Russia. There's been mixed reaction to the six-nation African peace mission led by President Cyril Ramaphosa. Leaders meeting with Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Russia's Vladimir Putin to try and bring an end to the conflict. Well, let's unpack this further now, and we are going to be joined by Professor Siphamandla Zondi. He is from the Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation, joining us now. And Prof, good morning to you. Thanks for your time. Let's begin with what I thought was quite a catchy headline by the Citizen newspaper. And it's a simple question. Was Ramaphosa tough on Putin?
Was Ramaphosa
tough on Putin?
Yeah. I wonder what the question is. In a mediation, in a peace mission, the question is longer than that. Was Ramaphosa tough on Putin? Was Ramaphosa tough on Zelenskyy? Because if he's going to mediate effectively, he's going to have to push both leaders to a negotiated settlement, because both leaders are needed for that negotiated settlement. So he's got to push them towards a peaceful settlement. But there's something wrong, and it's a typical South African problem.
Yeah.
It's five presidents, and the question is about Ramaphosa. Almost suggests the other presidents are juveniles of some form, weak killings that are unimportant. This is all about Ramaphosa. Very unfortunate. It's a kind of South African supremacist thinking that South Africa is the primary country, is the principal country, and it is doing this thing, and the South African president is one who's doing this thing. The whole thing is about South African president.
Yeah.
The five presidents needed to make this message to both leaders that you need negotiation, because both of them literally are on a military solution terrain, which is a fair option. Some people believe that this can be resolved militarily, and the two of them happen up to this point to believe in a military solution, and the African governments are coming to say there is another way. And the most successful one since 1945 has been peaceful and diplomatic solution to the most intractable conflict.
Yeah.
Whether that message was received is something that we're going to learn over a period of time. There's no single mediation I know which was successful with, or it's no single peace initiative, because it's not a mediation yet. Peace initiative that succeeded with the first meeting. The South African one started in 1984, and it actually gets parties to negotiations in 1991. So there was an 8-year period, 7-year period. We'll see this, how things change, if in the end, we look at this conflict and say it ended through a military means, where we say this initiative was a damn failure. But if in the end, it ends in a peace agreement, a peaceful settlement, then we'll say this initiative contributed. But we can't tell it right now.
Yeah.
It's still ongoing.
Prof, let's then talk about the content of what we heard this past weekend. And you make a point, a good point, that this wasn't Ramaphosa's mission. This is a mission by 6 of the continent's presidents, even though some of them were not there, were represented by their seniors or senior officials. Let's then listen to what was said. There was an emphasis on the UN Charter and what it says on the sovereignty of nations. President Ramaphosa, in particular, makes reference to a war that must come to an end. In fact, I believe that we actually have the president's words. So let's quickly have a listen to what President Ramaphosa had to say, in particular, around ending this war. We'll continue after this.
Is that we do firmly believe that this war must be settled, and it must be settled through negotiations and through diplomatic means. The war cannot go on forever. All wars have to be settled and come to an end at some stage. And we are here to communicate a very clear message that we would like this war to be ended.
Professor Zondi, the President of South Africa makes a particular reference to the war that must end. You've got to remember what Russia has referred to this as a special operation that is being conducted in Ukraine. I suppose that is perhaps some of what the Citizen newspaper, for example, are borrowing from to say the President has been able to call this for what it is, and that it is a war.
Yes, it is true. And South Africa has said it is a war. If you look at all the statements beginning in March 2 of 2022 at the United Nations, it calls this a war. It calls it a violation also of territorial integrity of Ukraine. And it calls for a peaceful settlement of conflict that is consistent with South Africa's foreign policy. And it is indeed a war because it began with an invasion, but once there was an engagement between two sides, then it became a war.
Yeah.
And it's a war that must end, and it is the most, by the way, popular position in the world. If you look at how countries' individual positions are in the world, even if you look at the UN votes, both in March 2022, in September 2022, and again now in February 2023, the overwhelming, absolutely overwhelming number of countries believe that the UN Charter principle of peaceful settlement of conflict must be honored in this particular case. This war must end, Russia must end, must pull out, there must be negotiations, the two sides must settle their dispute amicably. And that is perhaps what history will confirm later to have been the correct position. Because in the end, unless there is a military victory that happens in the next 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is, and peaceful settlement is neglected, in the end, it is likely that this conflict will end like most intractable conflicts we've seen in the past 70 years, which is peaceful settlement through negotiations where both parties put their issues and their issues get resolved.
Here's another point I want to pick up on. The President of South Africa, you're probably going to start beating me with the stick here. Why I'm singling out President Ramaphosa, and it is that he makes reference to the children, Professor Zondi, that are being affected by this war. And might I remind you that it is part of what has triggered the action from the International Criminal Court. Let's just have a listen to what the President had to say about the children of Ukraine.
With regard to the release of prisoners of war on both sides, the other issue that is related to this is the children who have been caught up in this conflict should also be returned to where they have come from, their homes.
Prof. Zondi, we've made reference to the war. We're now talking about the children. President Putin is indicted in part because of the children that we're told have been abducted by Russia from Ukraine. John Steenhuisen says President Ramaphosa is not an honest broker, and it is premised on the Lady R issue. But if you just listen to the content of what President Ramaphosa has had to say, can you genuinely say that he is favoring one side over the other?
That's a problem with, you and I, the journalists, I'm an analyst, so we have to look at facts and have to analyze it coolly. But John Tyson doesn't have that application. Remember, he's in the political game of gaining power from the other side. So in that context, it's just normal in politics that you can limit the facts or twist the facts in order to push a narrative. That's how politics works. And you can't really deny the opportunity to make a meal out of this and create a narrative and go. It's okay. It is fine. But when you come to real first, the the African president, given the consensus position they took long before this mission happened, had decided that they're going to look at the facts about accusations on both sides and make sure that those are put bluntly on the table, and I think they've done it right now. There is hardly any issue. I've listened to the Ukrainians, and I listened to the Russian spokesperson of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. None of them say, but he missed this particular demand that we have. Place all the demands on the table just to make a case that these issues can be resolved by being put on the table and confront them one by one, and therefore cover all the issues. And if that succeeds, there will be no need for the ICC process to proceed, because the parties will resolve in that process how it is done. They may decide to create a special tribunal or any other means. So, but all the issues were covered. Of course, John has certain issues that he should not have, because John and his party, by the way, have generally taken the Western position, which is for military solution to this problem. And their view is that there's no solution unless you have Ukrainian military victory. But in a war situation, looking for military victory is to look for more deaths, more destruction, and more division and more harm to the global economy for months and months to come. A military victory is not likely on either side, perhaps even throughout this year. And those who call for military victory means we must sit with this war as long as for some empiric moral victory of a civilization that some people think about. It's not correct. So our experience has taught us all conflicts can be resolved peacefully.
But here's the crowning moment, Professor Zondi. Here's the decider, the ultimate decider, at least for us in South Africa. And that is the BRICS summit in August. So you and I have agreed that President Ramaphosa touched on what needed to be touched on. It's a war that's going on in Ukraine by Russia. It is the children that have been abducted must be taken back to their country of origin. Now, President Ramaphosa has the unenviable task to tell us, because remember he has said the decision on whether or not President Putin will set foot in South Africa, that is my decision. Nobody else is going to make that announcement. I will make it. So, having seen the devastation with his naked eye in Ukraine, and also, by the way, having been rushed to a shelter because there was shelling, apparently, that still went on even with the African Peace Mission on the ground in Kiev. Do you think that that invitation will still stand to President Putin?
I just hope that the frankness with it, all the issues were put on the table in this mission will be replicated when President Ramaphosa communicates to President Putin what the decision of South Africa is, which is a simple decision, which is to say we are under obligation by national law, but also by virtue of being signatories to the Rome Statute, which Russia is not, which the U.S. is not, and others are not, to effect this arrest. So to avoid this, please send someone else. I mean, it's very common for presidents to send a prime minister, send a minister of foreign affairs to summits. The G20 it happens, and others. To send somebody else, or we agree we will go online for this summit. It's simple. It's not a train smash. It's just that the process that they given to the deputy president to go through is just taking too long for an issue of this nature, because it's pretty simple what needs to be decided. For it to take months or weeks with a task team, it just adds to this uncertainty, which is completely unnecessary, in my view.
Here's a final question, and you have less than a minute to respond to this one. And this is what this is my view, Prof, that there are two stories that occurred there. I'm now focused the attention on the security detail of the president that was detained in Poland alongside the journalists there. It's a simple question. Who must take responsibility for that mess? Because that was an unnecessary mess.
It's just unfortunate, Cody, that the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland has issued a statement and said there were dangerous weapons in that thing, and then there were permit issues. And the South African side is mum, is waiting to communicate to the press conference after 3 weeks. In international relations, unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way. And South Africa commits this mistake ever so often. You would, and I remember the controversy of our votes at the UN Security Council on Iran. And that became a huge scandal because it was said South Africa has voted against the resolution. And then South Africa corrected the statement. 3 weeks later, I all said, why wait even an hour to simply place on record what has happened? And this leaves us with the record of one side and leaves South Africa with a very dark cloud over it. And I just do not know why we are so slow in communicating what are obvious things. At least to say these are the facts for now, and a follow-up statement can then explain further. And that is very unfortunate for me, because that's an own goal as it has a stand. Yeah. Because in international relations, public perceptions are everything. And we are a small country, and therefore our perception, the perception of others about us in the world, matter a lot more than bigger countries. It's just unfortunate because it diminishes our prestige, it eats into our character, into our branding. And I think it is a communication failure from our side. But secondly, it seems that if what is coming out is true, there must be an administrative failure, because it's not about having taken copies of things rather than original documents or permits of things. I think it's an administrative failure again.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Professor Siphamandla Zondi from the Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation. What a fruitful conversation indeed.